spearhead a panel discussion we've put together for a local agency perspective on pavement preservation. So Ryan Worsman from New Hampshire DOT, we have Jim Major from the city of Concord, Dave DesFosses from the city of Portsmouth, Kyle Fox, town of Merrimack, and Scott Kinmond from Alton, New Hampshire.
First thing to start everything off, I was going to have kind of our panel introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their program, and just say kind of the status of it and any interesting facts about theirs.
Good morning. Thank you, Ryan. My name is Kyle Fox. I'm the Public Works Director for the town of Merrimack. We're a town of about 27,000 people, and we have about 180 miles of road, most of which is paved. Our annual program is about $1 million a year right now, and happy to entertain any questions you have. Thanks.
I'm Jim Major, the Highway Utility Superintendent for the City of Concord. It's about a city of 44,000 people. We've got 220 centerline miles of road, and our budget right now is about $2.7 million a year to do various paving projects. We do full depth reclamation, we do coal plain overlays, we've shim overlays, we do crack filling quite regularly. We've tried bonded wearing courses and rubber chip seals as well. So we try to have a bunch of different tools in the toolbox.
I'm Scott Kinmond, Public Works Director in Alton, New Hampshire, right on the southern tip of Lake Winnipesaukee. We're a community of about 5,000 year-round residents, well to between 12 and 15,000 in the summertime with all the seasonal folks. 92 miles of roadway miles, centerline miles. 24 miles of that is gravel roads. The rest of it's all pavement. Annually, we run our paving program. Historically, before I came, it was around about 950,000. Primarily, the former director there was spending the majority of that money actually on complete road rehab and reconstruction, kind of the old school work on the worst roads that he actually had and trying to rebuild them. Did a decent job at that way. Needless to say, my philosophy has been in the past communities is quite different. So we've gone into a preservation mode. I was able to, this past year, pass at town meeting about a $1.1 million budget for road, primarily spending about 70% of that on road pavement preservation work, doing everything from crack seals and trying to look at the toolbox. We'll be doing some shims and SAMs as well, and then we'll also be doing some shim and overlay work on that.
So I guess that would actually lead me to one of my first questions, unless anybody has a specific one they want to jump into. So you said you did a pretty substantial transition into preservation from that worst first. How did you achieve that, and what were some of the hurdles you did as you were going through there?
I kind of got lucky in Alton. The community and the board of selectmen there had pretty much figured out that they really didn't like putting all their eggs in one basket, and were looking at some of their road infrastructure that was starting to deteriorate because they hadn't gotten back to doing anything to it, and we're wondering, like, what are we going to do? And so it worked kind of well when I went to the community, because I was able to bring, this is what my philosophy is, and they were saying that's what we need. So it worked out well, and I was able to continue to carry that forward. Other communities that I've been in, I was actually in 2 other communities in the Lakes region as well. One on the northern side of the lake, once again taking over from somebody who had been doing it for a long time, 10 Worth Road situation, and really had to spend a lot of time. I was a police chief before that, did 24 years in law enforcement, never did a PowerPoint presentation until I was the elected road agent public works director and had to do a PowerPoint, and it was all about pavement preservation. So, you know, that whole educational curve, so I had to really influence that community and that board of selectmen to move forward in spending their dollars that way versus just dumping them into the worst roads and pulling that together. So it worked out well that they were ready, and they had already started to see some of that deterioration. They had not done any type of road surface assessments whatsoever.
Jim, do you want to kind of say, I'll have each of you kind of take the same
Sure.
question, is
Yeah.
how did you do the change and the shift in mentality?
Yeah, we've taken we have the road surface management system from the UNH Technology Transfer Center. We have a pretty robust GIS system in the city of Concord. We're pretty fortunate. And what they did is the GIS folks modified it to kind of meet the Concord's needs. So using that system to kind of monitor the roads and rate the roads, we go with a pavement condition index, and using that along with history of what we know of the roads as well, and in talking really to contractors and so forth and other folks, is where we transition into that pavement preservation as well. When I first got to the city 25 years ago, it was pretty much worst first, and then as we've gone through the past 10 or 15 years is when we really figured out that you got to do more on the good roads to keep them in good shape. So. And the other thing is the elected officials. You have to have buy-in from the elected officials. One of the things I was talking to somebody about earlier is just to try to keep them from deciding what roads you do. So have a pavement management system so that you can show them, present to them, come up with that pavement condition index, and have them not decide the roads. Have you have the public works director or your team decide what roads are going to be pavement preservation, which ones are going to be, reclaimed and so forth. And it gives a little bit of a barrier. We've had a little bit of a change in philosophy in our city council, and they're starting to get a little bit more involved, but hopefully we can keep them out of that. But we found out that the more money you can put into pavement preservation, the longer your roads are going to last, for sure.
Yeah, it's a great question. So we struggle in Merrimack a little bit with that question because we're very much underfunded. If you heard what my colleagues get per their road mile and what we get, it's a drastic difference. The other thing that we've struggled with is, or the struggle that I've experienced, having been a state employee. I worked for DOT for 12 years before going to the town and working in construction there. Everything was at a distance, so you just did what you did, and you didn't really have that local impact. Working for the municipality, we hear it at least on a weekly basis that they pay our salaries, and it's true, they do. And they have expectations for their roads, and frankly, our current funding is about a 35-year cycle for paving. So the way we get around that is back in 2006, we implemented MicroPaver as our pavement management software. And we've used interns to rate our roads. Every 2 or 3 years, we try and get summer engineering interns to help us build our database updates. And from there, that gave us a lot of credibility with which roads needed work on, which roads were the worst, which roads were pretty good. And through education of the council and the town manager and staff of the benefits to keeping the good roads good. We've really believed that for my entire time there, and that's had some good effect. But what we end up doing to meet that compromise is we try and spend about half of our money every year on our main roads and trying to keep the main roads good. We're struggling, obviously, with our funding, but we're doing a pretty good job to keep our main roads good. And once we get them good, we're doing the crack sealing. We're planning our first bonded wearing course next summer on our major arterial, US 3 in Merrimack. So we're really trying to foster that program. But to answer the local aspect of it is the subdivision roads, we really try and take a worst first approach, because it's hard to say we're going to do this neighborhood that was paved 12 years ago when this one hasn't been paved in 35 years. So that's kind of how we split the difference.
I know you mentioned that you use the pavement management system to get your roads, to decide what roads to do. Do you actually use the pavement management system to generate a list of roads to do instead of you deciding to do the roads?
It's a combination. The pavement management system will generate a list, and typically that usually does the worst to first, and that's where the pavement preservation input, basically from past experience and getting those roads that are already in good shape, keeping them in good shape. But yeah, so the pavement management system is to rate the road, so you have that PCI, and you can, as Kyle had mentioned, you really got to educate your elected officials on that, and then as well educate them on the process of trying to how you prioritize roads and so forth. Because he's right, you get the subdivisions that people haven't seen anybody for 25, 30 years, and you're back on a road that just got paved 5 years ago or 10 years ago, you get a lot of questions on that. But if you educate them properly and try to get them educated as much as you can of why you're going there, and you still try to do a little bit on these other subdivisions to try to get them as you go forward. So it's a combination.
Thank you.
Yep.
Actually, I'm going to give a follow-up on that one. So we at the state level, most of us have a very robust pavement management system and spend a fair amount of funding and resources to maintaining that every year. Kyle, you kind of already started to talk about how you use micropaver. Jim and Scott, can you guys touch on what you use for pavement management systems and kind of how they work for you guys?
Yeah, the Technology Transfer Center for the state of New Hampshire is pretty good, and they had a system that they had put together. It was called the Road Surface Management System, and that was before I started. They had that one, and when I first got there, we weren't using any type of pavement management system, and then, as I'd said, the GIS folks in our engineering department are pretty robust. They're really intelligent, and they took that system and kind of fitted into our GIS system. So basically, every 2 years, we try to go out and do an assessment of the roads, and like Kyle said, we try to get interns, but we didn't have any luck last year getting any interns, so we missed a year. We try to do every 2 years, and so hopefully this year we're going to be able to get that done and update it so you can get that updated pavement condition index. And it's interesting. I think I have 7 or 8 years of history with it, or 10 years, not years, but 14 or 15 years of it. And back in, program was pretty robust from the early 2000s to about 2008, and then we hit the recession. So the pavement condition index was going up. And then after 2008, I don't understand why, but the elected officials believe that road paving is one of the first things you cut when you don't have money. You know what I mean? They have a bad winter, we're not going to give you as much money for paving. So the money got taken away. We went from over 2.5 to 3 million to about 700,000 or 800,000 for about 4 or 5 years. And talk about a setback. You could see the PCI go down, and then took till about 15 or 16 when they started funding it again where they needed to. And I think in 19 it started to show a little bit of an uptick again. So I think having a pavement management system where the road pavement condition indexes is real important to be able to have that history and something to show people what you are using, and you're not just picking roads by chance. You do have a system that you're using to try to prioritize what you do.
Yeah, and I would just share the last 2 communities that I was in as both public works and also as a town administrator. We utilized the same program, the RSMS program through the state, and had great success with that because it gave you the scorecard. And when I went to Alton, that was one of the things that I had said to them: you need to establish what your scorecard is by looking at that PCI index, so you can then look at where you're going to spend your dollars and how you're going to get the best bang for your buck. And with that, we've now taken funds that we had left from 2021, and now we've they just completed it this week. And we had Public Works 1, actually, because we have an iWork Public Works software system. So Public Works 1 actually came out and has done our road assessment, initial assessment of all of our surface conditions of our roads, and has done the 360 video as well to capture any of that other data that's out there for us for our Public Works program. So I'm eagerly waiting to get our, our pavement condition index numbers, so then we can start looking and looking at those treatments like Jim mentioned there, and plugging them in as to where you can actually put those different types of treatments in. So, and also to show to the elected officials, what do you want to have for a scorecard? Do you want to have, B- roads, or, currently your roads are, I told them I thought that their road infrastructure was probably a B-, maybe a C+, but, it might come somewhere in that window. It's definitely deteriorated enough, and, the scores may be a little bit shocking, but we'll see how it all comes back. But then figuring out how they can then, utilize their funds and giving them a couple different scenarios. Very similar to the state program that they have. There you can plug in and do your forecasting with that program, and similar to the iWork program, we can do our forecasting as well and see how it keeps our numbers either going up if in fact we're putting X amount of dollars in, or if we're able to maintain. So I like that personally myself. It just helps back up what I think when you look in the room here, I'm sure there's a lot of institutional knowledge of dealing with pavement preservation. So even though we might talk about it and, I've had real life experiences with it, sometimes I know in dealing with elected officials for the last 35 plus years is they need to see some data to go along with that. Where before they used to just take your experience and run with it. Now they need to have the data back it up, even though you've been doing it for a long time.
Anything else you want to add, Kyle, or you were?
I guess I would just reemphasize the kind of what Scott just said. The biggest thing the pavement management system gives you is the credibility in front of your public and your elected officials. As long as we've all been at this game, they all think they know better than us. And the one thing that they will strangely accept is, here's a list. And they say, oh, okay. So it's an effective tool for that level of communication and buy-in. I will say we just last summer, our local NRPC, our local regional planning commission, had some extra staff available, so they did our SMS for us. And we said, well, it's free, that's great, and we can use our interns for the stormwater program, great. I found it not to be as valuable a program. It doesn't offer the budgeting tools and the planning tools, and of course it's subjective to the rater too, but the ratings came in quite high, and so we have not published that list to the town. Thank you.
So on Tuesday, we saw in one of the presentations that 70% of the road miles in the nation are on the local level. And while the states have robust programs in that, I guess my question is, there's a lot of stuff on what this group does on the national level, on research, on utilization of different treatments. What tools, information, resources can this partnership and then some of the national resources that are out there, organizations out there, how do we get that to the local level? What are the methodologies? What would work and what would help all of you in terms of trying to better implement these type programs and these treatments?
As far as this stuff here is valuable. Allstate, you guys are one of the folks that I rely on as far as giving us information. You guys have more information than people can handle as far as what it is, and that's what we do. We take that information and it's able for me to present to the elected officials to show them. You know what I'm saying? And that's where we get that information from you folks in situations like this or meetings like this, and you take away the information you have, and in having that stuff in our hand to go and show somebody does help us present that we need to do pavement preservation. I guess the biggest thing is to make sure you have some sort of a scorecard or pavement condition index. You really have to have that, because as Kyle had said, it doesn't matter what you have. If you can show them something, doesn't even have to be something that's true. If you show them something, at least they can see something. They've got data and you can back it up. And having all this information coming to these seminars and so forth is helping us to be able to, at least in my case anyway, present to these folks that there are other options that we need to be trying and looking at to extend that pavement life too. You know what I mean? You reclaim a road, okay, so 5 years, what do you do? Do you just leave it? Do you just let it go? It's in good shape. Why do you go put another overlay on it? Well, you need to crack fill it, so you make sure you keep the water out. You may put on another bonded wearing course to hold it and extend that life. You may do a rubber chip seal at some point in time as well, so that you can have a 30-year life cycle. That's our goal, is to have a 30-year life cycle. And at the point of $3 million a year, we're pretty close. But I'm not necessarily sure that's going to be there. The funding, I guess, is probably the biggest mechanism. So
I would just say, we all struggle on the funding side of things from time to time. I mean, I started out in a community that only had $300,000 to put towards a roadway system that was about 77 miles, and 57 of that was paved, but still it wasn't quite enough. I would say, as far as the organization, when I first heard about it, actually, as far as the Northeast, Pavement Preservation group here, I was like, really? I didn't know anything about it. And I would say, we do rely upon our vendors, and I know there's a lot of vendors here, to actually supply us with information about product, costing of a product, performance of product, those types of things. But that's what we've had to rely on. Some people might say that you're then using biases, or maybe putting all your eggs in somebody's one basket. We always have to be conscientious about that. On the municipal side of things, as far as, bid laws and, making sure that we're not too cozy with somebody and, did we get a hat or a shirt from them or any of that kind of stuff, making sure that we're above on the ethics side of the standards that are there. So realistically, I heard some of the conversations this morning here about, data collection, research, those different types of projects. There's no doubt that if this organization is able to bring that to us on a local level, it takes away, from it just coming from one vendor. In that situation there, that if everybody that's a participant in this organization is providing that data back into the organization, that comes back down to the local level for us. I know for myself, when I'm able to use that versus just using, one of our vendors. And generally, sometimes some of the vendors as far north as you come, they're few and far between. There's some people that just have that expertise and they're able to maximize, their ability to provide many different treatments for pavement preservation. So, and elected officials sometimes don't understand that, that there's really only a few people that can actually do that and perform and do, able to get that product in our hands and on our streets. So, as far as the organization, I think that would be beneficial for us on the local side of things as well. I mean, not that I don't appreciate, our vendors. We greatly appreciate them because that's really the only resource that we've really had.
I think kind of along the same lines as what Scott was saying. We have so much going on in as public works officials. Paving is just a little tiny piece of what we do on a daily basis. And it's really hard to find that focus time to stay up to date on the latest technologies. What are other people doing? What's the best practices? And a conference like this can really help to give us time away to focus on just pavement and getting kind of a boot camp aspect of it. And certainly we do that with our partners too. I know Indus is in the room and all states. They provide a lot of personalized training for us. They'll sit for hours with us and go over, they'll come up, with no contract, just really focusing on educating us, looking at our roads. Here's what we've seen others do. And those kind of partnerships are just so valuable. And anything that helps bring that together is good because we just don't have the dedicated staff to focus on pavement management.
Just a side note, Northeast Pavement Preservation Partnership, we're actually going to try to start working with LTAP, which you guys should be involved with LTAP. So normally when we have these conferences or other things available, LTAP should reach out to you guys and let you guys know when we have conferences like this. So that way we can get the local participation here. So it does, give you guys information and valuable tools to use as well. So that should be coming in the near future. So, or you should get like email blasts from LTAP. I know they're involved in all the local agencies, so that should definitely help you guys out as well.
Hi guys. So we talked a little bit last night. A couple of vendor and I were getting together, and I think as the DOTs, we're doing these projects in these cities and towns' backyards. So it could be just as something as simple as reaching out to whoever the the person in charge, superintendent, DPW director, whoever it is, when these projects are going on, and just simply inviting them to the projects to have them observe them, and then from there tell them, hey, bring a couple of your friends from the local cities and towns that are right around you guys, and just get them exposed to these different treatments that we're doing. I mean, you know, something as simple as that, I think, could snowball into something much larger, you know, and use that as an opportunity to introduce them to things like these.
So yeah, I think that's actually a really good initiative. I don't know if do you guys collaborate with your adjacent towns when you're doing pavement preservation projects, or is that something you could potentially incorporate?
Yeah, we try to when we're doing something innovative. We've been experimenting well over the last 10 years now. Looking back at the map, I was surprised how long ago it was. But we did our first full depth reclamation with asphalt injection back in 2012. And when we do those kind of specialized projects, we do try and invite other towns. And I will say, I do wish DOT would do a better job with that. I mentioned earlier that we're going to do our first bonded wearing course next year. I did actually get invited to see a DOT project doing that through all states. So it was good. They were doing the job on state roads in Merrimack a couple of years ago. So we spent some time down there with Gus and his team, and you know, really learned a lot about it. Got excited about it, and now we're going to go into the implementation phase. So I think that's a great initiative.
Agree, being invited or even looking at some of these things, that has happened, and it comes more from the vendors than I guess it does through the state. I mean, I know I have talked to Eric in the past as well. Actually, when I first started the job 25 years ago, Eric and I had gone back and forth about crack filling and different things like that as well. So, but yeah, that's kind of how I've learned about some of the bonded wearing courses, the rubber chip seals, those type of things, just to go look at them. Because I guess I'm just like any other Yankee, right? You got to show me to make sure. I got to see it before I'm going to put it on my road. So it's been a good relationship with vendors, and I know Todd has invited me when he was working for the city of Manchester. We've actually gone down and seen some stuff, and they've done quite a bit of experimentation with stuff. So it's good to see and be able to be invited to that stuff.
To be honest with you, if it hasn't been for our vendors that service our area, as far as the invites, Todd, Mill, and Phil, I had a question, and he said, hey, listen, we're going to be doing it. Gave a bunch of dates and that kind of thing there. We've done a lot with Allstate because I've done conventional chip seals, double chip seals, and then transitioned from that in one community because they didn't like the dust and it was hurting the dog's feet and that kind of stuff. You go from one community to the other. Things are a little bit different. We went to asphalt rubber chip seals. A lot of people didn't have any experience with those, but they were getting the same type of pushback from some of the neighborhoods and some of the communities, folks that were there. So, once we ended up having a community that was having that going on, then we were able to pull that in and say, hey, listen, we're going to be doing it in this community. Why don't you come on over and check it out? We did have some folks that are able to do that. So, that's been real helpful in being able to do that. There's no doubt, when you end up having a conference and if you're able to get the local folks here and you're able to do some form of a demonstration or end up having, some presentations, that certainly helps out. There's no doubt. I mean, DOT's been helpful for me personally. I mean, talking with Eric for an example of specifications, putting together bid specs for crack sealing and that kind of stuff. Struggled, we've talked to the vendors. Everybody wants to bid it differently, and my big thing is making sure we have the standards to make sure we're getting good product and the proper application of it. So, the DOT has been helpful that way. There hasn't, towns and DOT collaboration, I mean, I've watched it for 30 plus years now, and unfortunately, it doesn't make a difference whether you're in law enforcement or you're in public works. They don't sometimes collaborate as well as they ought to. The local sheds and the local work groups might, but when it's the organization itself, the bigger hierarchy, I guess you'd call it, they tend to kind of go over the top there, and we don't play as well as we should that way.
Maybe, I don't know, it's maybe the first time there's been local agencies that did a panel like this. This is really great. I work with a lot of local agencies in implementing their pavement programs, and one of the things that's come up in a lot of other places, and I was curious if you all have a similar experiences, unlike state DOTs, if you go into a neighborhood, say, and you got to do a road, do you find you got to do all the roads in that neighborhood for public perception purposes? Like, why are you paving Bob's road or not my road? My road's in just as bad shape as that. And how does that impact your ability to program? Because then your costs can really skyrocket as like the size of that project kind of increases.
Yeah, you nailed it on the head. If you go into a neighborhood, you better be prepared to do most or all of it if you can. And if you can't do it all in one year, you better be able to do it in a couple. Because as soon as you go into one, experiencing that right now. I had a culvert that had to be replaced, and large enough project that our engineering group, which is separate from Public Works, went ahead and did the project. The road leading into it and into the neighborhood is in really bad shape. All they paved was the culvert. And we've gotten a bunch of calls, when's now this road gonna be done? Kind of screwed my program up because we're not really programmed to go in there for another 8 years, you know what I mean? So we're listening to it, and that's one of the councilors now is asking, geez, when is this road gonna be done? So, yeah, I mean, over time, what you try to do, or what I try to do anyway, we try to do is you get a better bang for the buck as well. You don't have to mobilize to a bunch of different parts of the city. Mobilization always is a big key. So we try to do, concentrate on one neighborhood if we're doing one particular treatment so that we try to get it done and be done with that neighborhood and then move on or do, pavement preservation in another neighborhood or someplace else is what we try to do.
Same as Jim. I mean, city to a town, same type of situation where biggest thing for me is trying to maximize my bang for my buck in mobilization and everything as well. Public perception, is key. I mean, because they're the ones that actually are doling out the money and the taxes, and they want to support the program. And if you don't do something in that neighborhood or in that vicinity, like Jim mentioned, you got to be prepared to defend that. And you got to fall back on what the education is relative to the pavement preservation philosophy and how the reason why that you didn't do that. Because I may face that a little bit this year just because right now I feel like I'm the Band-Aid guy. So I'm going around and I'm going to actually try I'm going to do different treatments in other areas. And some of these treatments are brand new. They've never been experienced really in the town. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But, at least what my experience has been, we try to stay, we'll take care of an area of town and do that area. Move to and once again, you're still looking at your scorecard to see if in fact it all jives.
Yeah, so I guess we're a little different. We have had some success doing exactly what you said, just doing the portions that need doing and skipping around at the same time. We do try and build our program around mobilization costs to be fair to our vendor and to get the best pricing for our program for the year. But we do have cases where we just do what needs to be done and we take those arrows, but then we fall back on our pavement management system to answer those questions. And most often, once you talk folks through it and the rationale, they do understand and then they become supportive. So it has actually worked as kind of a teaching tool to do that sometimes, because you get the phone calls that start out not so nice. Most often, by the end, they're pretty good phone calls. The one case, we had a old subdivision road. It was a kind of a long, about a mile road, and of course, sometimes those subdivisions, they're built in phases. So that's one of the things we experience a lot. And so we go in and we pave the old phase, or the first phase, and that's all we do. Knowing the second phase still isn't in great shape because again we're on a 35-year cycle, and we just have to go with the empirical facts and here's our program and here's why, and it's budget and those are our limitations. So
has there been any thought about collaborating with other towns in terms of lumping maybe crack sealing in one contract amongst like 3 towns? So essentially what you're doing is maximizing on the economy of scale, getting lower bid prices and making the dollar go further that way.
So yes, we've thought about it. Attempts to do that kind of stuff haven't gone well, and it's not at the public works level. It's not for lack of us wanting to. Finance departments and town managers tend to not play well together. And different bid specs and who's going to inspect it, and they might get $1 more of value than we did, and so it's a great idea and something we'd love to do, but we found it to be a challenge that we haven't overcome yet.
It's something that we've done as far as the city of Concord goes at this point. What we'll try to do is tag off a state contract. let the state go ahead and bid it. Obviously, they're going to have way more volume than we do, but with talking to the vendor that did get it, try to talk them into at least honoring part of the unit prices for it. You may have to change mobilization and traffic control, but as far as the cost to put it into the crack filling and so forth, if we can get that unit cost, them to hold the state contract, we've been pretty successful in using that number as well. So that's what we try to do in Concord, as much as we can.
Yeah, the joys of municipal government in purchasing and procurement policies are always seem to muddy the waters and make our jobs a little bit more difficult. But, and I think that's probably one of the biggest struggles. My past experience has been, for an example with crack sealing, is trying to get together with our neighboring communities, and we've piggybacked off of one another. In other words, if in fact somebody has gone out to bid on crack sealing and they've gotten a unit price, and we like that specification, we've reached out and we're getting, or if our purchasing policy allows us to piggyback off another community's bid, and they're willing to allow that, then we've been able to do that kind of on an informal MOU type of situation there. And then, like Jim mentioned, we do use state bid pricing as well, as if we can. Sometimes it doesn't always fit to every situation. In a larger organization like Concord, it may, because they're doing more issues with, say, for an example, say they have a unit price that went out for doing granite curbing, for an example, or sidewalk type stuff, and they've got, sometimes you can piggyback off of that. I don't know how many miles of sidewalk that these gentlemen have, but I mean, I have 3.25 miles of sidewalk, which is small compared to what they have for a network structure. But once again, at some point in time, I just did a road project last year that had granite curbing, and so that certainly could have been, I could have jumped onto that if I wanted to do it in-house or work that project within our own work group.
I've come up with at least two more while y'all are talking. So have you guys had success in utilizing the state specifications and special provisions, or do you guys pretty much go your own route and try and write your own?
Perhaps from my background, but we try to do everything with DOT spec, whether it's road construction, bridge construction, or our pavement management program. The bigger contracts in the state know the specs, they know how to do the job, so we're not reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, we use the state spec 99% of the time. City of Concord has its own construction standards as well, but as far as unit pricing and unit costs and unit payment items, pretty much state bid is what we do.
Yeah, same here. I mean, New Hampshire DOT has their design standards that are out there, and whether it be you're buying gravel or you're buying asphalt, we rely on those standards. We fall back on those. We write them right into our bid specs, make reference to those. It's kind of like the Bible, as I call it, especially for somebody like myself who's been self-taught in the profession all the way up through, other than the professional education I've gotten from a lot of you folks that way. So, when we look at that seems to work, really well for us that way.
Hey, I sat here thinking, let me first ask the three of you a question. Do you three all get the Pavement Preservation Journal? Are you familiar with that at all? Okay. What I'd say to you, I'm sitting here thinking about the collaboration and how you learn. FP2, which is a foundation that's supported by industry, publishes a magazine every quarter that's free. And it's a Pavement Preservation Journal. It's a great educational tool. A lot of articles in there. There's been several articles from the Northeast in there with different processes and so forth. But it's a national magazine. It's free. I would encourage you to sign up for that. It's easy to do. Very easy to do, and anybody in the room can help you do that. Which leads me to the question is, if we look at the national resources there are for education, and education never ends, and we all understand the position you guys are in, okay? And during the year, you have a paving program that takes a very small portion of your time to manage people, plow snow, complaints and so forth. So how, as an industry, do we get the information to you guys who are our ultimate customers and consumers? Today, there is a great resource at the National Center for Pavement Preservation, and it's based in Michigan at Michigan State University. Neil is here, and they're really the coordinators of this conference, and there's 4 of these around the country. And it's an exchange at the DOT level, and we're obviously all trying to get more the LTAPs and local people involved, and that's why I'm so pleased that you're here and telling us, how do we do it. There's another resource that's incredible to me. There's been some ongoing research that actually 22 states are involved with, along with this FP2. There you go. Personal delivery. You can't ask for anything more. How timely, Bruce. How timely. Okay. But my point is there was some collaboration done by 22 states and FP2 as sponsors that have done some major pavement preservation research at Auburn University on their track and on a state highway, and also at the same time up in Minnesota. I mean, we don't live in Alabama, and we don't have Alabama weather. We certainly have pretty close to Minnesota weather, okay? So that was the reason for the collaboration. And there was a presentation here on Tuesday that was, it's the data now, this has been going on for 10 or 12 years, and they're really getting some incredible data about life extensions, okay? For example, if you crack seal before you do a treatment, you can expect to get an additional 2 to 3 years out of the treatment by crack sealing before you do. So my point is there's a lot of stuff out there, and how, from your perspective, can we get more information to the user agencies, okay? And I'm talking, the states are pretty well connected, but how do we get to the towns? How do we get to the cities so that this information is there? I mean, you certainly can talk to all the suppliers and the vendors that you deal with, but from a national basis, there's such resources out there that you don't have time to log on every day and look at the Michigan State, website and spend all day. But we could, if we had, let's call them cut sheets, that did it, or an easy access. So I guess I'm kind of challenging you as how can we better communicate to you? That's really my question.
And I'll be kind of biased about, I won't say it's biased, but I also assist the local LTAP as a training specialist. So, and they are a great resource. LTAPs in every region and certainly have their ups and downs depending on how it goes with staff and how they get educated and how their work group is in that situation there. I think it's great to be able to have that, for your organization, have that collaboration with them as well, to be able to feed that info that then comes to us. We actually have in my opinion, we have a great listserv for our local officials, and also state officials are on there as well. They get a lot of good information when it's coming across, and they have the ability to push out a lot of good information. Sometimes we get overwhelmed with so much information as well, but short. As you mentioned, as far as the information coming out, as far as life cycle extensions and that kind of stuff, that's all great info. At least I look at it as great info, because when you have to go back to that elected official and support a treatment, or if you're going to test drive something, and being able to do that, and exactly, and being able to have that, as I call it, a fact sheet or a cut sheet, that would be able to do that and help support that as a handout, or in an electronic form that you could use in a PowerPoint situation, to those folks there, to have them understand. It's such an educational process with the folks that are out there. They just don't understand it. And I mean, I enjoy being able, somebody calls up and they start nagging at you as to why you haven't done anything with their road, and you explain to them about roads and what we're trying to do as far as trying to keep the water out of them, and why we do ditching, and because we have open ditches in the North Country, and that's how we get the water away from our roads, and that the water is really what kills our roads, and that kind of stuff. So they, once again, it's getting that information out there. Now I think a lot of municipalities have spent in public works groups, whether it be through their Facebook pages or their other media sources that they can get information out. I mean, I use a Facebook page just as an informational, and whenever we're doing something, we're out ditching, or, you know, we're going to be doing our pavement program, we'll photograph, take pictures of that, and use that as an educational tool to our community. So whatever information, I think, coming down through, certainly in those short fact sheets and that kind of stuff that we can use, I think would be helpful.
Not much to add. The LTAP, as Scott had said, that's really the conduit to get to the local level. And you'll see that goes to just about everybody on the local level is on that listserv he was talking about. A lot of good information. So if you guys can get connected, you know, as Mike was saying that they're going to do, I think that would be the best way really to get the information out to them. And you got to realize too, you know, I'm fairly large community. I have a lot of resources. You know, Scott's almost a one-man band, I believe, and Kyle may be too. So there's so many other things that are going on. It's not that we don't see some of the information sometimes. Sometimes it's overwhelming too. And you're kind of in whatever crisis maybe have happened at that time, and you try to pick out the most important things to try to focus on and so forth. But I think the LTAP is probably the best way to get that information.
My colleagues said it all, really. I would really echo the part about giving us the tools to reach out to public. Little videos for our Facebook pages to educate would be wonderful. I think we all have Facebook pages, and we use it a lot to educate our community on what we're doing, why we're doing it, and having a group produce something really nicer than we could ever do on our own would be really useful. I think that's a great idea.
One of the things that, while I was kind of setting up this panel, I talked to a lot of different local municipalities and several of them since, and they've expressed varying interest in kind of starting to implement preservation. Now, when we consider preservation sections and treatments, we're definitely looking at it at a different level and a different perspective than you guys can. I mean, there was talk about using on roads that are 20 to 30 million easels, whereas like that's not the case in your communities, not even close. When they reach out to us and trying to ask those questions, what are some of your banner or favorite treatments that have really worked in your neighborhoods and smaller communities that I can recommend or that we can recommend?
So for us, kind of our bread and butter is the shim and overlay for most things. Where we've been so underfunded, we have a lot of roads, particularly main roads, falling apart, and to do full box reconstruction is just not in the cards. So I mentioned back in 2012, we did our first pilot with the full depth reclamation with the asphalt injection, and you know, I'm kind of cautious by nature, and it is the public's money, so I picked two. There were two roads, little subdivision roads, at the bottom of our list, but they were in kind of a high water table area. There was no way to get rid of the water. So I said, well, let's try this. And we partnered with Continental and All States to do that. And, here we are 10 years later, there's not a crack in the road. 5 years ago, we did our first main road with that system, and each year since, we've been trying to get our main roads back into shape using the FDR. Particularly this year, our program got off to a really great start. We're actually almost done for the year because of the condition of our roads following the multiple freeze-thaw cycles we get now in this part of the state. We had 3 main roads really falling apart badly. Potholes were terrible, and then we'd get the snow and then the rain and potholes again, and it was just an awful year. So we actually did 3 more roads with FDR this year. That's kind of our 2 bread and butter things. We do try and do crack sealing as much as we can. It's one of those things with a limited budget. We have a hard time finding the ability to do it, even though we know we need to extend. And of course, we're always trying to look at new ways, and we think the bonded wearing course, once we get our roads good, might be a good treatment for us. And we're always looking for new ideas. So
I can't think of one that is a go-to, I guess. I guess it kind of comes back to what this whole work group is about, is pavement preservation. I think you really have to look at what road you're doing and what is the best for that road. Since we've started doing that, it really, we've done a bunch of different things. I think crack filling is probably, if not the most important, one of the most important things you got to do. You know what I mean? We've changed philosophy on it. We used to go, you know, crack fill the roads that were cracked so bad, and now we've kind of gone back into the better roads. You crack fill them. Yeah, you don't get as many cracks in them, but the more you crack fill them when they're newer, the longer they're going to stay, and you don't get those cracks that multiply going out. And we've always crack filled before we overlay. It's one of those things that somebody had mentioned, that, you know what I mean, you extend the life by 3 or 5 years by crack filling before you overlay, and that's one of the things we've been doing for about 10 or 15 years anyway. So that's one of the, you know, but crack filling to me is probably the most important thing on a new road.
One more thing that I did want to mention that we started 2 years ago, and I'm really excited about, using our highway crew. We use our sidewalk machine, and we bought a grinder attachment for it. And so if we have areas of road which are largely pretty good, but have some really bad distresses, we've started taking a week ahead, and we'll grind a bunch of roads and put out a bunch of signs saying bumps ahead. And then we rent a sidewalk paver ourselves. And we've had some pretty good luck with that, just a way to extend our budget, because without that program, we'd have to overlay it, where a lot of the road is still good. So that's kind of a program that locals may want to try.
Yeah, and I would just echo that really the go-to thing really is crack seal, and to be honest with you, is I think consistently, you know, as far as the treatment that we do every year is crack sealing. Other than that, we try to look at the toolbox that way. For an example, this year I'm going to actually experiment. I haven't done it before. With I've got some roads that are rutted and slightly out of shape. They're not in good enough shape to actually take a conventional or a asphalt rubber chip seal all by themselves. So we're going to do a leveling course, true them up, get the water so they're shedding off them, not running down the wheel ruts, and then going to membrane them up with doing an asphalt rubber chip seal on them. We've had good luck with that asphalt rubber chip seal and being that membrane. Because of that freeze and thaw cycle that we end up having, I think we're getting actually a better, you know, flexibility within the asphalt, because the asphalt today does not have that flexibility. So it's nice being able to have that membrane put on the road. So seems to work well. So, you know, once again, I think it's the toolbox and what you have available out there, and being able to try to, and not to be afraid to try it out. You know, you may not jump in with both feet, but you're certainly going to stick a toe or two in and see what happens, and see if it works, and see what you get for life cycle out of it. You know, that's where, once again, sharing the data, you know, kind of makes it a little bit less risky in some ways when you make the leap to go ahead and invest dollars into doing a treatment that hasn't been experienced either by yourself or the community.
All right, I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to ask us any questions. I know that wasn't really in the plan, but. And do you have anything you want to ask us for? I mean, there's a wealth of knowledge in this room, so.
How can we get more money from the state?
Talk to your legislature?
Yeah, I guess I don't have a question, Ryan. I just want to thank you for the opportunity, and thank all of you for being here and listening to us from the little perspective. I think the better partnership we can form, it'll help us all. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for that too, I guess. And I guess in seriousness, if any of the states or any of the Alton or anybody that's looking to try something, I guess I've never had anybody approach us to say, hey, we'd like to try this particular treatment, you know, whatever it may be. Would you partner with us and give us some sort of a cost break, I guess, you know what I mean? So if that's, I'm always open to that. I think any one of us up here would be open, or any community would be open to the fact if, you know, somebody wants to try a particular treatment and you see a particular road in a town or a community where you think it may work and it may help everybody in the end, if we could get a reduced cost on something like that, or cost sharing, Obviously, we'd like it for free, but I know that's not necessarily in the cards, you know what I'm saying? So, but keep that open, I guess, as far as that goes.
Yeah, I like Jim's idea there. It's all about, what you can do to save money to make things go further. It's not like we save it and put it in our own pocket, like folks do in the private side of the world here, or in our own homes. We actually use it to spend more money and be able to do more work. So, any of that type of collaboration, I think would be awesome. So if in fact, you folks are, enterprising to look at, okay, maybe we can, get together and group some folks together, and we can provide this as a cost that would be reduced because we're able to take, a region and use this type of treatment. That would be, I think, would be helpful. On the state side of things, being able to have maybe some collaboration with, putting together some group purchasing that way, even though they do a great job with their purchasing and procurement, and allow us to be able to allow municipalities to pretty much piggyback on a lot of that type of situation, but maybe have some discussions, maybe out of this type of a format, and be able to carry that back, to those different groups, so that, Eric's group and that kind of stuff, and Ryan being able to carry this back, because they have local people here at this type of a conference providing that kind of feedback, and they hear it and they say, hey, listen, a lot of those guys are like the asphalt rubber chip seals, for an example. Maybe we should put together that specification and do, when we do our state bid, include that in there or something along that line.
All right, yeah, I really want to thank you guys for coming out. It's really been nice for us to kind of get the local perspective and get it more involved, and we're hoping to do that going forward in all of our meetings. So maybe when we're in Vermont in 2 years, you guys could come to that too. So great, a round of applause for these guys, and just a thank you.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.